we continue to be concerned about what is a worrisome trend in humanitarian access. It's not going in the right direction. And that is a significant issue of discussion in Geneva. And frankly, it's a significant issue of discussion here at the State Department as we consult with other ISSG members. We continue to urge the regime to allow unfettered and sustained humanitarian access, which it hasn't been doing, and we're continuing to press that case with Russian counterparts because they have influence over the Assad regime to try to help affect that. So we are pressing our case with them as well.
So do you regard that as a violation of the spirit, if not the letter, of the cessation of hostilities? I mean, that was humanitarian aid was part of the whole project.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's fair to say it's the constant, continued withholding or impeding by the regime of humanitarian access is in fact violating both the intent and the spirit of the agreement.
And do you regard the government's attacks in Aleppo as violations?
Well, to the degree that they are targeted and going after opposition groups or civilians, absolutely.
So what is the consequence of these violations?
Yeah. Well, the bigger consequence is we get no closer to a peaceful solution to a civil war. And I know that's not the answer you want, but we're going to continue to collect information and the data on violations of the cessation. And there are continued violations of the cessation that aren't just happening in Aleppo. They're happening elsewhere in Syria. We're continuing to work through the task force to collect the information and the data, to analyze it, to create a record here. And at the same time, doing everything we can to press, in this case in particular, the Russians, to continue to use their influence to try to get Assad to stop this activity.
So the consequence then is that you get written down in a book someplace? To what end is the plan somehow to prosecute or to go after those at some point who violate the cessation of hostilities? Well, because otherwise, what is the incentive for...
Look, there could be ramifications down the road. Right now, we're focused on monitoring and assessing these violations and keeping an accurate record, and then trying to use the appropriate amount of influence on those who are violating it. And by and large, the violations continue to be against the regime, and Russia continues to be really the only party that has credible influence with the Assad regime right now. I'm not going to rule anything in or out at this point about other methods or measures of accountability which may occur in the future. That's why, because we're not going to rule anything in or out right now, we're going to continue to analyze this data and continue to keep track of it.
I'll stop after this, but I just don't understand how do you expect to convince people to respect the cessation of hostilities when there is no consequence for doing it?
I didn't say there would be no consequence.
But there isn't any right now. There's nothing.
Right now, the focus is on
someone writes it down.
And look, largely, it is still holding. There have been and continue to be violations. I note that. I admit that. But largely, it's still holding, and the violence in Syria is largely down. And there's no question about that. And it's lasted a heck of a lot longer than I think anybody originally thought at the outset that it would.
Or not lasted.
And well, again.
I mean, this is a cessation of hostilities in name only. The hostilities haven't ceased.
No, I would disagree with that. I wouldn't say it was in name only. There have been violations, absolutely.